is life to all who hear and obey. Your word endures forever.
It's the Word, and we're going to read about the Word in John's Gospel, chapter 1. It's on page 1063. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light, he only came as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me.' Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in the closest relationship with the Father, has made him known."
When I once had a friend, and he used to have on his desk a little box with a plastic figure of Jesus inside. Jesus was wearing kind of off-white linen. He had long, kind of flowing brown hair and a beard and sandals on his feet. A little plastic Jesus. I wonder how you feel about that. It's a bit like a Star Wars character in a box. But I think sometimes that's what people think about Jesus is like. He's just like a character you can put in a box. He has no real significance or relevance for life. He's just a figment of imagination, an imaginary friend. You can put him in a box and stick him on your desk or on your shelves, and that is all the significance he has. I think John 1 shows us that Jesus is bigger than that. Or for other people, I think, when they think about Christianity, they might think about a complex system of rules and regulations and things to follow and do. Maybe people saw a little bit of what was happening in Rome when the Pope died earlier this year, and it all just seemed remote and strange. There was all these rituals happening, and people saying strange things and doing funny things. And in all of that, Jesus becomes very small. But neither of those things capture the heart of Christianity, which is not about plastic figures. It's not about rules and rituals. At the heart of Christianity is Jesus and responding to him rightly. And over these past 2 weeks, as we come to John chapter 1 and verses 1 to 18, I've been hopefully trying to kind of show us that Jesus is much bigger than we think. Even if we've been a Christian for a long time, Jesus is bigger than we think. Over these past 2 weeks, myself reading and looking at these verses has caused me just to see and to wonder at Jesus, how much bigger than us he is. How much bigger than I thought he is. And the last time we saw he was the Word, the one who is eternal, who has always existed, who has never been a time when he has not been there, who brings life and light to everyone. He is the one who made us and then brings life and light to us. He is God himself. Bigger than we could imagine. And this morning I want to kind of push a little bit further into that thought of how much bigger Jesus might be. But let's start by looking at verse 6, where John writes, "There was a man sent from God whose name was John." He's not talking about himself here. He's talking about John the Baptist. "And he came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light." In history, John the Baptist came and he testified, speaking about the light, the Word. The one that we saw last week was eternal, was God, it was Creator, who had life and light and life in him. But he was only a witness to that light. And so he says in verse 9, we read in verse 9, "The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him." The true light was coming into the world. Then I think you get a little bit of a strange comment in verse 10. What does it mean when it says he was in the world? And though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. I think what it's saying there in verse 10, that he was in the world, is pointing to the true light, the Word, who is in the world, who could be seen in the world. That is, the Word was active before Jesus arrived in Bethlehem. I think it creates a link with verse 4, where we read that in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. That is, it was possible, and it is possible, to know something of God from the world around us. Something of the divine from the world around us. You get a glimpse of God's creative hand, the word's creative hand, in the amazing complexity and beauty of the world around us. You're not constantly amazed by the things in the world that you see? I was reading a book. I bought a book for somebody for Christmas, and I decided to read a little bit of it. Hopefully I've not creased the spine so they don't realize I've read. But I was reading about the northern February red stonefly. You find them in Scotland, and then there's a river in Wales and one near Hereford. Only places you find them in the world. They stay in a larval form in the river, and they can stay in the river for up to 3 years. But then in February, after about that time, they crawl out, and they're the most beautiful little fly. Red body and lacy kind of wings, and they come out and they mate, and the whole process starts again. The world is amazing. Or the beauty of a native fly orchid. You find them, they're out near Our Daily Bread and Sandside, and there's this beautiful little stalk that comes up, and on the top a little flower that looks just like a fly. God's creative hand at work. The light was in the world. We could see something of God. But the problem comes there in verse 10, that though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. While the Word was active in the world, people didn't see it. As the Apostle Paul would later write, since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what he has made, so that people are without excuse. In the world, there is a rejection of the Word, the light that the Word brings, even though it is there in the world. People turn from the light, and it's a tragedy. And we read in the rest of the New Testament that it's not just one or two people that do that, but everybody does that. Turn from the light, from the Word, the one who made everything and who can give life and light. Which I think is then, when you're reading through it, why you get a somewhat surprised when you get to verse 12 of our passage. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor a human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. There seems to be this universal rejection of the Word, and yet, here are some people now becoming children of God, coming back into relationship with God, God bringing his family back. Speaking here of a reality that many of us know, don't we? That we've been brought back to become children of God. It's a wonderful thought, isn't it? To be made a child of God, brought into God's family, to be with God. And people are not born Christians. You might have grown up in a Christian family. That doesn't make you a Christian. No, it means that we become part of God's. We are adopted into God's family, and it's something which has to happen to us. And you get a little bit of an idea of what that involves in verse 12. Firstly, it involves receiving him, receiving the Word. It's funny, that word receiving, isn't it? Sometimes, you might hear, it seems a bit more old-fashioned now, receiving a guest. I kind of think of maybe the Dowager Duchess in Downton Abbey or something like that, receiving a guest into her drawing room. But the idea, isn't it, of receiving is welcoming someone into your home, bringing them in. And when someone becomes a child of God, that's what they do with the Word. They welcome God into their life. They receive him. They say, come and make your home here. Receiving him. You realize that you've not accepted the Word, that you've rejected the Word, and you've pushed him away. But there becomes a point when you welcome him into your life. Receive him in, and he comes and makes his home with you. Secondly, verse 12, do you see, it's not just receiving. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name. That is moving from a position where you don't believe the Word to a position where you believe the Word. You come to see that there's more to life. And in more than just this material world. That God exists, that he sustains the world, that you've rejected him and you believe in him. Becoming a Christian involves believing in the Word. In a sense, that's then what happens on our side. We receive, we believe. But then there's also the perspective that comes from God, God's action for us. Verse 13, we become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of a human's decision or a husband's will, but born of God. Born of God. It's his decision, his will. And when someone becomes part of that family, adopted into his family, it's because of God's action and will as well. You might even say primarily because of God's action and will that then leads to the receiving and the believing. And so how does it work? Or maybe it's God pricking your conscience. Maybe you've come to church for a long time, many years. Maybe you're waiting for a time when you can stop coming. But actually there's something which pricks your conscience to think there's something more to life than what the world around tells me. A feeling that maybe you should come back. A thought that you see people around you who love Jesus and they seem to have a security and a hope and a peace in life, which is something which you don't have. And God's pricking your conscience. That God can do it in all sorts of ways. And they might often seem natural and normal. But behind them all is the activity of God working in your life. The question is whether you keep resisting him and pushing him away, or whether you'll receive, whether you'll believe. In some ways, what I've said so far is the context of what I want to say this morning, in a way. The Word is extraordinary. He is God. He's an intimate relationship with the Father and the Son. He made everything. He is life and light, but people reject that. But some come to believe. They become children of God. And I think what he's doing is setting up for something in us to see that God's determination is for people to become his children. It's what will be worked out as you read through the rest of John's Gospel. If we had time, we could do that, but you'll be relieved to know we're not going to read it all this morning. But maybe you could read through and see what God's determination is. God's determination, the Word's determination to make a way for people to come to know him again, to come back into his family. Which should make us rejoice and marvel at God's glory and his greatness and his faithfulness and his love and his unmerited kindness to people like you and me. And what was the determination that God had to enable it to happen? Verse 14. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. See the determination of God? He made this world. He is in control of this world. He gives life and light to the world, but people reject him. Now, he could have stopped there, couldn't he? And yet God's determination is the Word was going to become flesh. Take on humanity. God, who is so vast and great and glorious, was going to be in the confines of a human body. He was come into the womb of Mary and be born into this world. And at that point, Jesus came into the world. I've been referring to Jesus and the Word kind of almost interchangeably all the way through these past 2 weeks. But strictly speaking, Jesus only came into existence when he was born of Mary. The Word has always existed. But Jesus became into existence when the Word took on flesh and was born of Mary and was given that name because he would take away his people's sins. John the Baptist recognized something of that. You see it in verse 15. John testified concerning him. He cried out saying, "This is the one I spoke about when I said, 'He who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me.'" Although John was born before Jesus, the Word, had existed for all of eternity. And Jesus became flesh when he took on that human nature. And therefore in Jesus we see certain wonderful things. You see verse 14? We have seen his glory. The glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father. Glory, that thing which makes something extraordinary You know, if you went to a place and you say, what's the glory of that place? What must I see to see the full glory of that place? And someone will tell you where to go to see the thing which epitomizes the glory, the wonder, the greatness of some place. Well, you want to see the glory of God? Then look in the face of Jesus. You want to encounter God? Look at Jesus. Of course, we can, in some sense, encounter God in lots of places, and lots of people can say, we can go out into creation and we'll experience God. Of course, the Word was in the world. We do see something of God's glory there. Others see it in strange experiences or coincidences which happen. But the place where you fundamentally and most gloriously see God's glory is in Jesus. The Word became flesh and make his dwelling amongst us. That's where God's glory is seen. Whereas, look at how verse 18 puts it. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in the closest relationship with the Father, he has made him known. Do you know that God is essentially invisible? You can't see him with your eyes. And even when in creation you see something of him, learn something of him, you don't actually see him. But in the Son, in the Word became flesh, you see God's glory. He has made God known to us. It's quite humbling, isn't it, to realize that you can't find God through your own ingenuity or hard work. You can't discover the Word. But the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst us. And as we now open up the Scriptures and we see him revealed there, we see God. We see God revealed in the face of Christ. As Hebrews says, in the past God spoke to our forefathers through the prophets in many and various ways. In these last days he's spoken to us through his Son, who became flesh and dwelt amongst us. Jesus made God the Father known because he was always with God from all eternity. There was never a time when he wasn't God. And because people were rejecting the light and the life and the light in the world, the Father and the Son determined that the Son would become flesh. The lengths he would go to so that you might come to know him. And what is he like? We see his glory in Jesus, the incarnate Son. But we also see grace and truth. Do you see it there in verse 14 again? The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Or verse 16. Out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. It's probably actually that the glory of God is seen in his grace and truth in the Son, in the Word made flesh. In the Old Testament, Moses, who saved the people from Egypt and took them through the Red Sea into the Mount Sinai, he asked God to show him his glory. And God says, I'll show you my glory. And he put Moses in a cleft of rock and he allowed him to see just his back. But as he went by, God proclaimed his name. This is what we read. The Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, the Lord. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. He does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generations. The Lord, the compassionate and gracious God that we then see in the Word made flesh. Grace and truth, steadfast love that never changes, covenant love. God who had been rejected by people, rejected by you even, came to show you grace and truth in his Son. And as we see the gospel progress, we see Jesus beginning to display his grace and truth to those around. But not everybody sees it. There's some people who welcome him gladly at first, only to turn on him and send him to the cross later. There are others who are hostile all the way through. But there are others who are completely transformed by Jesus. Completely transformed. Their lives turned around. They find in him one who has grace and truth, giving what is not deserved. Truth, showing the reality of who he is, making sense of life in this world. And yet, through all of what Jesus did, he reveals that grace and truth. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus came so he could die on the cross to prepare a place for us to be in God's family, in God's house, in God's presence. And even though people rejected him, he came determined to show what he was like. And so this passage pushes our understanding of Jesus. Before all time, he was the Word. He was with God, God himself, who made the whole world. He gives life and light. He was in the world. People rejected it. But God didn't stop. He kept on going so that we might come to know God again. The Word made flesh, became a man, fully God, fully man, so that we might see the glory of God. We might see grace and truth. The glory of God, the grace of God, the truth of God has a face. And Jesus is the face. And so this Christmas, marvel at Jesus. He's bigger than you could imagine. And that means he's far more significant than we can possibly grasp. Marvel at his glory. Be amazed that the Word took on flesh and lived in our world so that we might see God. Rejoice in it. In a moment, we're going to celebrate communion. And communion is that meal where we get a little bit of bread and a little bit of wine. It seems a poor meal in some ways, doesn't it? We're not getting very much to eat. And you might not even like the bread. You might not like the wine. It might not taste really nice. But it's a significant time for us because in this meal, we remember that Jesus took on flesh. And that flesh was broken for us. That God tasted death in Christ. Remember his blood which was spilt for us. So that we who have rejected him might come into his family and find forgiveness. It's a meal for Christians to celebrate what Jesus has done for us. That we've been born of God. But this morning, if you've not received Jesus, if you've not believed in him, then when we come to celebrate communion, allow the bread and the wine to pass by. But maybe you're listening this morning, and something is pricking your conscience. Can I encourage you not to push that down and to squash it? Because maybe you're beginning to realize that Jesus is bigger than you thought, bigger than you imagined. He's more than just a plastic figure in the past. He's more than a fairy tale. He is the one who made everything and made you and gives you life, who came into the world so that you might become a child of God. And maybe this morning is the time for you to turn back to him. Acknowledge your rejection of him. Ask for his forgiveness for the way in which you've rejected him. Tell him that you believe in him and you want to receive him. And ask to become one of his children. If you do that this morning, then please would you celebrate communion with us as a sign of what God has done for you. But before we come to communion, we're going to sing again a song which focuses on Jesus and the wondrous mystery of his incarnation, his life, and his death.
Your word gives life to all who hear and obey. Your word endures forever.